Hello and welcome to Collective Basketball Agreements. I'm your host, Joe Manganiello, coming back with another WNBA free agency recap here in the late winter of 2025. And speaking of winter, we're going to talk about the Chicago Sky today. It's going to get a little windy. Better hold on to your hat. That's so lame. Anyway, Chicago Sky, definitely one of the coolest teams. Another weather reference there. One of the cooler teams in the league when you consider they got Angel Reese as the face of the franchise. I don't eat there that often, but shout out to McDonald's and a really, really cool sponsorship. First ever sponsored meal on the McDonald's menu with Angel Reese. I live in Austin, Texas, so I can get a solid barbecue burger elsewhere, but I'm going to let her have that. I'm sure her and her representation were handsomely paid for that, which we love. We love to hear that. But Chicago, really fascinating team. You know, they won the title in 2021. You know, as I was really getting into the WNBA and was entering that world, you know, Candace Parker was my favorite WNBA player even before I worked for the Liberty. And it certainly was humbling for her to kick the Liberty's butt in the playoff setting. And then Courtney Vandersloot coming to the Liberty after that championship run. It was really interesting. I knew that Courtney was in a different phase of her career by the time that she got to the New York. But it was really interesting to see, okay, like this is, you know, the Chicago Sky winning a championship in 2021. And then hitting, you know, like kind of falling off and how that works and sort of the ebbs and flows of this. They were able to draft two incredible young players in Camila Cardoza and Angel Reese. And all of a sudden, they're not that far. They're not that far from competing. Now, I think it would be a little bit of a leap to say they're back in title contention so soon, but they're going to be better. And it's interesting, you know, when was I going to record these episodes and sort of, you know, say, okay, free agency is mostly done. Now we're getting closer to draft conversations and training camp conversations and sort of timing these previews, especially in launching the CBA podcast. We just saw a pretty big trade the other day where the Chicago Sky were able to add another veteran who's going to bolster their playoff chances. So we're going to talk about all that in this conversation, this free agency recap. In some ways, it's a 2025 preview, although there's still a lot of things left to be worked out. But let's go over the fundamentals of this team. Disappointing 2024 season, although Angel Reese having, you know, bad timing on an injury in the last third of the year really fed into these final numbers. But the record 13-27, that was sixth in the WNBA's Eastern Conference. That's last. And they didn't make the playoffs. And it was very possible that they were going to make the playoffs, which I got to say, as someone who has my sympathies and my affection for the New York Liberty, that was really fascinating to me. This idea that after, you know, everything that they had gone through, losing the finals in 2023, they're trying to win the championship in 2024, and then they might have to play Angel Reese in the first round and this upstart Chicago team. And I guess I just should say on the record once and for all, like, I think it's insane that Angel Reese was not the number 2 pick in that draft. It's just really, it just doesn't really make any sense to me. I mean, Chicago took Camila Cardoza with the 3rd pick and had to get lucky for Angel to still be on the board. So, I mean, behind the scenes, I would love to be a fly on the wall for that conversation. And I don't know. I mean, I think Angel and Camila understand the opportunity that they have to be this new age dominant front court, shades of Tim Duncan, David Robinson, just really powerhouse. And so I'm sure, you know, that's water under the bridge or just sort of technicalities or sort of, you know, what's done is done. But I mean, It's just really crazy that Angel went 7th in that draft. But nonetheless, back to the fundamentals here. So their offensive rating, 99.1. That was 10th in the WNBA last year. Defensive rating, 105.6, 8th. So they weren't even close to a top half defense last year. And their negative 6.5 net rating was 10th in the WNBA. Only a couple teams worse than that. And then as we look at their financial fundamentals here in the month of March, they have 4 guaranteed contracts on the books. They have 8 unguaranteed contracts. So 0 roster spots available today. But of course, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for them to change things up at the bottom of that roster. Only $199,000 in cap space. I use Botrack, so that's what I'm basing that off of. Note that the Sky currently have 4 draft picks, the number 10, 16, 22, and 28th pick. I would be shocked if all 4 of those picks are used for, rostered players. And alternatively, I would expect that 22 and 28th pick to be used for international draft rights. I think that number 10 pick is going to be awesome this draft, just from bird's eye view in terms of how I've been following the college basketball season and mock drafts and different scouting reports. I'm pretty sure they're going to get someone strong with the 10 pick and someone who's going to probably play a little bit from day one. To really talk about it, I thought for the Sky this offseason, it was going to be really important for them to take seriously that they're not, they don't have to be in a rush, but there are things about last season that have to be improved. And that's really, I think, the best way for them to measure success in 2025. On the one hand, they were the number 2 rebounding team in the league last year. Angel Reese was damn near Moses Malone as a rookie, in terms of her rebounding prowess. That's great. Now, having the worst 3-point rate and the worst assist rate in the WNBA, not as great. Not as great. They needed to address the offensive side of the floor, in large part because, hey, on the road to a championship, selling tickets, having a team where you have one of the most famous basketball players in the world, and you're in a great city. Let's put a product on the floor that we can be proud of. They had the lowest mark. How about this? 4.8 3-pointers made per game. That was the lowest mark in the WNBA since 2020. Again, the way the game is going, it's great that you have all this size. It's great that you can dominate the glass. You got to put the ball in the basket. Got to find a way to do that. And so when we look at this trade, just from the other day, Ariel Atkins was stuck on that Washington Mystics team. We're going to talk about them another time. Now she gets to play in Chicago and really open up the floor for the Chicago team. It does cost the Sky the number 3 selection in this draft, as well as a 2027 first-round pick swap and a 2027 second-round pick. So the Mystics are able to get 3 draft selections, one in about a month, and a really good one. And we'll talk more about that under the Mystics section, and maybe a little bit today as well, just because I do think that there is... Well, I'll put it this way. I earlier this morning, I listened to the Dunker Spot episode that came out where Sirit was on with Stephen Nikias. And, Sirit's point was you have such great talent that you can take with that number 3 pick, and you can align the timeline of someone like Sonia Citron at Notre Dame with Angel, Camilla, and your other young players. Why are you... For lack of a better word, why are you sort of shortening the window where you're bringing in a veteran player like Ariel Atkins, who's going to cost more immediately, and you need the young players to catch up to her? I totally understand Sirit's point. I think that for me, I don't mind Chicago trying to get as good as possible early. Alternatively, I'm a draft guy. I love the development of young players. It's what makes the sport of basketball a global phenomenon. It's the idea that at all ages, players are always looking to get better, And there's always that development story, that improvement story. And that is part of being a fan of the sport, is following that development. And so you had an opportunity, most likely Sonia Citron, maybe even Olivia Miles, if the number 2 overall pick that belongs to the Seattle Storm now, although I think they're going to take Miles. But let's say it was Citron, or, I mean, I guess that's the thing, right? Chicago, they could have taken a player similar enough to Ariel Atkins where you at least have to ask the question, like, would it have been better to have rookie scale in terms of, this is a player that's going to be making about $78,000 a year, whereas Ariel Atkins now comes in as the highest salary on your books, $200,000. Oh, by the way, only one more season, and then they're a free agent. So there's a lot of considerations here in terms of the business of the WNBA, because a year from now is so unknown. I think that there's a very fair debate as to whether or not Chicago should have done this deal. I don't think they paid too much. I think it was a fair price. 1 draft pick this year and a good one, and then 2 picks out 2027. But still, I do think this is going to put some undue pressure on not just the coaching staff, but also the front office to make sure that they do win in a shorter window, in a tighter window than maybe they originally thought or was necessary. Now, I probably should say Ariel Atkins, only 28 years old. She's not necessarily going anywhere. And by now, I should mention, she won a championship in 2019 with the Mystics. She was actually the last player from that championship team on the Mystics roster. Shout out to Elena Deladon, who is not in the WNBA and might never be. She's somewhere in the world enjoying her life. But, Atkins was on that team, was also a 2020 Olympian. Atkins with career averages of 13.4 points a game, 36% shooting from 3. She adds 3 rebounds a game, is always above 1 steal per game, and has 5 all-defensive team nods to this point in her career. I think that this Chicago team, they're going to try to just rip people's heads off on defense, and that might be her own personal goal, is I want to get back to that all-defense team. She hasn't made it the last 2 years, as Washington's defense has not been all that desirable, or rather, not a lot of awards coming from the Mystics these days, but it's a great basketball debate because I think Atkins is going to fit in very well. And alternatively, she's always going to be compared now to Sonia Citron or whoever ends up being that number 3 pick, or really just the whole top 5 in general. Who would Chicago have gotten had they stayed in that spot? And then I'll also again reference they have the number 10 pick, so they are going to add a young player of note, just not one of the absolute best players from this draft. Now, that's not all Chicago did. It's just what they did most recently. Probably the biggest name that they added this offseason was Courtney Vandersloot. Won a championship in the Sky in the past. Now she's back. Signed a $185,000 contract, unguaranteed. But I think that is a good negotiation between both sides. Vandersloot is able to secure more money than New York was willing to pay. New York has a lot of contingencies I think they're trying to keep open, and we'll talk more about that in their episode. To date, looking at Spotrac, Courtney Vandersloot has made about $1.5 million in career earnings. She was the number 3 overall pick in 2011. She's been in the league a while. But this was, a last great opportunity for her to lock in a very high salary. She's age 36. Who knows what the league and the landscape is going to look like in 2026. It's possible that she's going to be in that same market again, 185, 190. Her average salary was 191 with the Liberty the last 2 years. It was 195 her most recent year in Chicago. So I'll clarify that I do think that Vandersloot could live in this 180, 185, 190 range for another few seasons because her experience, her status as a veteran, as a leader, as a future Hall of Famer is so valuable. I actually thought before the Sparks made very different moves this offseason, I thought that they might prioritize coming in over the top and making an offer to Vandersloot that she couldn't refuse so that she could help mentor Rickea Jackson and Cam Brink. And in some ways, I think Chicago made the best offer for her. I mean, we don't know. I mean, it's possible that Courtney would take a little bit less and go to Chicago than go somewhere brand new like LA. But all in all, I really love the signing. Chicago adds Kia Nurse, very solid veteran, multi-positional, $145,000 deal, super fair price for her. They're able to get Rebecca Allen, who brings size and steady shooting from the wing spot. That was an interesting move because they were able to acquire Becca Allen from Connecticut. They traded Lindsay Allen and one other player. I really love Becca Allen's game, so maybe I'm just biased. I think that she's exactly what they were looking for. So that's a great outcome for them. Chicago also signs Michaela Onyenwere, who I think she's been looking for a home, ever since she had to leave the Liberty while still on that rookie scale deal. She's been looking for a home. She's been looking for somewhere where she can really fit in. She's not quite a starting forward, but she has such a well-rounded game. You want her and a player like her in the rotation. And so to get her for $125,000, I think it's a great deal. All in all, I really think that Chicago did a wonderful job putting together a rotation that can be competent and can win games right away. And we'll see. I mean, they were well under 500 last year. If you told me that now it's a 44-game season, right? If you told me that they doubled their wins from 13 to 26, a 26-18 record, I'd be curious what seed that lands them. But I think that is reasonable. I think that is a reasonable thought for them. We'll see what Moriah Jefferson gives them, 30-year-old guard on a protected deal, about $145,000. There's a few other players. I'll be curious if they make the final roster in training camp. And as we talked about before, that number 10 pick, I mean, they probably added enough shooting where you don't have to go full-on shooting specialist with the pick. But, Georgia Amore comes to mind as someone who I think could slot in here. Again, maybe they've already addressed that concern enough. We'll see. Big question that's still out there for this team is Chennedy Carter. And Chennedy Carter made some headlines last year. She guarded really tough, was a really tough point of attack defender. Wasn't afraid to meet people all the way in the backcourt and knock them down. I'll let that thought float for a second. Maybe you'll remember the play I'm thinking about. Look, Chennedy Carter is a hard worker. She didn't play in the W in 2023. She was a training camp signee last year. Earned a roster spot. She came off the bench. Then she elevated herself into a 17-3-3 type player. She's not a traditional point guard or a traditional shooting guard, maybe somewhere in between. She's not a great shooter from three. Now, she does have a really awesome mid-range package, and she's a great finisher on drives. She's only age 26. So I was curious, was Chicago going to come out, make a great offer, wrap that up as soon as possible? And by wrap that up, I mean her free agency, I should say. Just put a bunch of saran wrap on Chennedy. She can't go anywhere. No, wrap up free agency. Ultimately, they decide not to extend the qualifying offer by the reporting I've seen. And so she's an unrestricted free agent as of this recording. And everyone's taken 1-year deal so that they can get back out into the market in 2026. We're going to see exactly, what her value is. There are teams that have enough cap space and, could easily let go of an unprotected contract and make room for her. So if you're Chennedy and Kennedy's representation, you're waiting for a can't miss offer. You're not going to settle for something too small. I don't necessarily want to throw out imaginary numbers, but if I'm Chennedy Carter, I'm looking for something that's in line with what Kia Nurse got, in line with what Michaela Onyenwere got, somewhere between 125 and 145. I mean, as a starting point. But, last year, Chennedy Carter was better than that. So, we're going to find out. We're going to find out what her value is and ultimately who prioritizes adding her. I would say they've probably done enough. Chicago's probably done enough on the wing and on the perimeter where if they just stick to their draft picks and, round out the roster, try to maintain flexibility for future years, I think that they have a rotation that can make the playoffs already, but we'll see if they want to prioritize Chennedy Carter long term. And so in closing, I'm excited. I think Angel Reese has Defensive Player of the Year potential, certainly all WNBA potential this year. I would love to see Camila Cardozo, take a leap as a center. And they were the number 2 rebounding team last year. Could they be the number 1 rebounding team next year? How much improvement can they get on those shooting numbers I mentioned earlier? Chicago is going to be one of the teams I watch very, very closely and very, very intrigued by them. So we're going to wrap up this episode of the Collective Basketball Agreements podcast. Stay tuned. Thanks.